There's been a few bits of news so far this week and some really exciting things like the release of the Dawn of War 4 cinematic yesterday, but one of the new things that we got officially released today is the updated rules and detachment for Vulkan Histan and the new Salamanders Combat Patrol. They are getting their own unique bespoke detachment, which is an updated version of the Firestorm Assault Force from the main Marine Codex, and Vulkan Histan is getting a slightly updated, slightly improved, unique new datasheet. The new detachment is called Forgefather's Seekers, and as mentioned, it does follow very, very closely with the Firestorm Assault Force, which previously was the flamer-focused salamander-themed detachment in all but name anyway. Obviously, with 10th edition, they moved away from having sort of a actual named salamanders, iron hands, white scars, army rule and ability, and instead it was put into these various detachments. But the Firestorm was always the one that felt the most salamanderish to me anyway. So this is very much based on that, and it is essentially just bringing it back towards the salamanders so that they can really claim it as their own. So it does stay very, very similar, but there are a few new tricks and abilities and tools that you can take advantage of. Where we should probably start off with all this though is with Vulkan Histan. He is the Forgefather of the Salamanders Chapter, and he has got a awesome brand new shiny model that you can see on the screen now. But to go along with the new model, he's got a new datasheet. And it's largely stayed the same. It is in fact almost identical apart from a few small but actually quite impactful and exciting updates. He is still the same 100 points, and that still nets you the 6-inch move, toughness 4, 5 wounds, a 2-up save and a 4-up invulnerable save. He still has his Spear of Vulkan for his melee attacks, but this is where we see the first of his new improvements, because whilst it is still 6 attacks at strength 6 minus 2 AP and 2 damage, it now gains devastating wounds on top of all that, and that makes him much, much scarier than he was before. The threat of rolling a 6 to wound and doing those flat mortal wounds can make him a lot more intimidating for your opponent, but even with just purely average rolling, you are going to be doing that little bit better. I think based on average rolling, you still kill around 2 Marines. Like, it isn't going to get you a whole extra couple of Marines dead or anything, but it does just make him a bit more reliable. I think from my math hammer, it goes from giving you around a 71% chance to kill 2 Marines with the old profile to around a 79% chance to kill 2 Marines. So he's not going to do a huge amount more in terms of actual models killed. It's just much more likely that you are going to kill those 2 models. So he's just a bit more reliable and a little bit better at killing things. And for the same 100 point cost, that's definitely nothing to sneeze at. He also still keeps his bolt pistol and his Gauntlet of the Forge. This again has seen a small but welcome change. It's still d6 plus 3 shots that auto hit at strength 6 minus 1 AP 1 damage, but now it has the pistol rule, so it can actually be shot in combat, and this just again makes it that little bit more useful and reliable, and you're going to get a bit more use out of it, even if you are stuck in melee for a good portion of the game. Now, with that profile, no, it's not going to kill a huge amount. I think it averages to about 3 damage to a Marine profile, so killing 1 Marine and wounding another, and that's with his special rule, as we will get to in just a second. His rule is called Forgefather, which is actually the same buff as it was before. It gives you the option to pick an enemy unit within 24 inches in the shooting phase, and it gives friendly Astartes models reroll to wound on their torrent or melter weapons. So importantly, this isn't just for Vulkan himself, this is for any Astartes model that targets the enemy unit that you've targeted. So anything from Infernus Marines to Land Raider Redeemers with their Flamestorm cannons, they will absolutely love this bonus that he can give. So yes, it's not the greatest at killing things like Marines. As I said, it's going to kill about 1.5, but into squishier things like Tyrannid Gaunts or Guardsmen, it is actually quite effective, especially with that reroll to wound. The buff will get him about 5 to 6 slain Guardsmen if you shoot into them, so it can actually do a fairly decent job of clearing out those weaker enemy units that are just sat back holding an objective and that sort of thing. He still has his 6-up Feel No Pain as he did before, and then his other main rule, the old Seeker of Lost Relics, has been renamed to Seeker of the Unfound. Now, straight off the bat, I think that's a cooler name, I like it a lot more, but essentially it does the same thing. You pick an objective when this model is set up on the battlefield, and whilst this model is within range of that objective, he gains OC 10, a leadership of 5+, and a 4-up Feel No Pain. So he becomes insanely good at holding that key important objective for you, and also with his new and improved weapon profiles, he is much better at just fending off any light attacking units that may be trying to kind of get him off it. So I would say overall I think he's still good. He was already, in my opinion, alright, nothing amazing, and I don't think like a must take by any stretch, but he wasn't awful, and these new updates have made him just better. He's still 100 points for a potential 5 wound, 4-up Feel No Pain beat stick who can kill off smaller chaffy units in melee or with shooting reasonably well. And then of course, whilst he isn't the best army buffer in the world, he can give your other flamer or torrent or melter weapons much better value with his force multiplier getting them rerolls to wound. So if you are going in on the Salamander theme and want to bring a lot of stuff that has got torrent or melter, he is a very fun and also genuinely decent pick to add to your army. He also adds a really nice buff to the new detachment, so we will just jump straight into that. The new detachment, as mentioned, is very similar to the Firestorm Assault Force. It has an identical detachment rule, just with an extra bit added on. So what you get is Vulkan's Quest, which, like Close Range Eradication, it gives your ranged weapons the assault ability, so you can essentially run and gun with all of your army now, giving you that really nice bit of extra mobility. But then also when you target an enemy unit within 12 inches, you get +1 strength on that shooting. So now you are looking at anything from strength 5 Stormbolters on your Terminators to strength 10 Melter on your Eradicators. It really does open up a lot of actually important breakpoints for essentially giving you +1 to wound when you get closer to the enemy. So if you are looking at an army that is going to be in the midfield or moving up towards the enemy and you just want to control that middle of the battlefield in no man's land, this can actually be really good on a lot of your stuff. It can be the equivalent of getting you +1 to wound, and of course having assault means you can get into that range that much quicker. And I mean, just for a target unit that, you know, I like and generally aren't very good at the moment, just things like Terminators, the shooty Terminators, giving their Stormbolters assault and +1 strength does make a fairly big difference to them. It's not enough to make them good or like a must take, absolutely not. But some of the biggest weaknesses of Terminators are their slow movement and their underwhelming firepower, and this does actually improve both of those, so it can make Terminators a lot more viable in this detachment. Where it gets really nice is also on things like your Infernus Marines, which will likely be a very popular pick in this detachment. It gets them to strength 6 on their Pyre Blasters. Now this maybe isn't as great into things like Marines because you are still wounding them on 3s, but it does make your Infernus Marines better into things like Terminators, to Guardsmen, to Orc Boys, even regular Custodies. Anything essentially that is toughness 3, toughness 5, or toughness 6 will feel this improvement, and even in a pinch, they are actually now better into the new toughness 11 Knights. Going from strength 5 to strength 6 is also essentially +1 to wound against those targets. And a unit of 10 Infernus Marines will go from doing around 3 to 4 wounds to a knight without this buff to doing around 9 to 10 if you also have Vulkan's reroll wounds, so it can actually make them a legitimate threat into some of those really tough targets. The other reason that Infernus Marines may make an appearance in your list a lot more in this detachment is that the detachment also buffs them a little bit further. So if you have Vulkan in your army, which if you are running this detachment you really should do, then your Infernus squads also gain a rule called Seeker's Companions, and this lets them do an action after they've advanced and also shoot whilst they are doing an action. So now your Infernus Marines can move up that extra d6 and they can still get you a nice secondary started and then still throw some flamer shots into a unit 12 inches away, so they do actually get a good bit better in this detachment. Maybe again, like the Terminators, not enough to have them be considered a top tier pick. But certainly in this detachment with Vulkan, I think they can become usable against the right enemy targets. Now, I'll say it straight away, it's obviously not going to be beating the Gladius or the Stormlance, that is a given, but for a pure Salamander army, I do think this is a nice improvement over the base Firestorm Assault Force, and it can get you a really nice thematic and little bit stronger army if that's what you want to use. There are also some slight changes to things like the enhancements and the stratagems. 3 of the enhancements are the same. You do keep War Tempered Artifice for 25 points, which gives the bearer +3 strength to their melee weapons. Forged in Battle is still here, which is 15 points to turn a hit roll or a saving throw from modeling the bearer's unit to a 6 once per turn, which can be so good on things like your Terminators when they are already quite hard to kill. You can just guarantee that one of them will be able to make a save, so they will stick around for that much longer. And then you also keep the 20-point Adamantine Mantle, which gives the bearer -1 to incoming damage, or instead reducing the damage characteristic to 1 against any torrent or melter weapons. So this can massively reduce any damage that you take from those guns, although it is worth noting here, melter is a modifier. They did clarify this in an FAQ, so although against something like a melter rifle, it will drop that D6 damage characteristic down to 1, you would still suffer the melter 2 if it was within half range. So you are going from essentially taking D6 +2 damage to just a flat 3. So it definitely doesn't make you invulnerable, do be aware of that, but it will make your character a lot tankier against those flamer or melter weapons by a good amount. What the new enhancement is that you get is called Immolator. This costs you a mere 10 points, so it's pretty cheap, and it gives the bearer +1 to the attack characteristic of torrent weapons in his unit. So if a character joins those 10 aforementioned Infernus Marines, they will go from 10d6 shots to 10d6 +10 shots, meaning you are looking on average at 45 auto hits, which in this detachment especially lets you wipe out an entire 20 strong blob of Orc boys in a single volley. So it can be a very effective upgrade for a unit of Infernus Marines that you really want to juice up and throw into a key enemy target. Elsewhere we have the stratagems. Again, these are mostly the same. There are just 2 new ones to look at. We get the usual Armor of Contempt, and then we also see Immolation Protocols, Crucible of Battle, and Burning Vengeance return from the Firestorm Assault Force. The new ones are Wrathful Inferno, which is 1 command point. This gives you the option to shoot after you've fallen back. It is infantry only, but it can be a great tool to have if a unit gets bogged down by some chaff and you just want to fall back and light them up with a load of bolt rifles or flamers or something like that. It's just a really useful ability to have in your back pocket, and for a cheap 1 command point, it can be clutch if you have a unit that is tied down and you really need them to be away so they can shoot at something else or shoot at the target that was tying them up. It can be an absolute game changer. And then you also get Blazing Earth. This is also a nice cheap 1 command point. This is done at the start of the enemy charge phase. It allows you to pick a unit of yours that has torrent weapons, and then an enemy unit within 12 inches of that unit and visible, and then until the end of the phase, whenever that target enemy unit decides to charge, they have to subtract 2 from the charge roll. So if they were trying to make a long bomb charge from deep strike, you can make that go from a 9-inch charge to an 11-inch. If they were trying to make an already difficult 11-inch charge, you can make it so that they will automatically fail it, so there's no point in even attempting it. And even on some really close targets, things that are like 5 or 6 inches away, so quite likely to get in, you can drop that to say a 7 or an 8-inch charge, which may still be worth doing because it does make the odds of them making that charge a lot less reliable. You go from around an 83% chance of making a 5-inch charge all the way down to just a 58% chance of making a 7-inch charge. So it does make a fairly significant difference, and it could at the very least mean your opponent has to use a command point, so they are spending their valuable command points on a reroll to make sure they do get into your unit. Overall, I have to say, I don't think it's a bad detachment. Certainly, if you play Salamanders and you want to run a cool, thematic, fluffy army, this really will let you do that. You do get a lot of benefit for things like your flamers and your melters. Vulkan can be a fantastic addition to the army, and there are some genuinely really nice combos with things like Vulkan's rerolls to wound roll and the +1 to wound from Crucible of Battle, so it can get some really quite scary output on some of your shooting. As I said, it's not going to beat the Gladius and it's not going to beat the Stormlance for pure competitive play, but I do like it, and what I also really like about it is that they've made this detachment which is thematic for the Salamanders with their new combat patrol, and what I hope we see is that for the other combat patrols we see for things like the Raven Guard, the Iron Hands and the White Scars, they also get their own take on some of the standard generic Marine Codex detachments. So things like the Iron Storm for the Iron Hands, maybe they'll get their own unique, slightly modified version of that. The Vanguard Spearhead for the Raven Guard and that sort of thing. It could be a really fun, interesting way to push people to play those less seen Marine chapters. And also, if they do them well, maybe a way for GW to move the meta away from things like the Gladius and the Stormlance, which is what we see far too often, in my opinion. At the end of the day, time will tell. We'll have to wait and see. As I said, don't think this one quite manages to muscle out Gladius or Stormlance, but it is not a bad detachment, and certainly I think it will be a lot of fun if you are running a Salamanders army and you really want to go all in on the theme of it. As always though, I'd love to know what your thoughts are on this updated detachment, and also what you would like to see for the other chapters when their combat patrols release and they get some updated rules as well. Let me know all of your thoughts and theories and hopes down in the comments below, and as always, thank you very much for watching. Please do like and subscribe for more Warhammer content from me, but until next time, I'll catch you later guys.